Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us for another edition of Hold My Drink, where we navigate the news and politics with a chaser of civility. I'm your host, Jen, inviting you to grab your favorite beverage, sit back, and imagine with us how to create a new American identity together. Welcome to this week's Hold My Drink podcast with my co-host, counterweight co-host, David Bernstein. Today we have Angel Eduardo with us. He is a writer, musician, visual artist in New York City, and he is kind of taking the internet by storm with his piece on star manning, as well as some conversation on merit and meritocracy. So before we get to those things, the first question is, what are we having for this conversation today? And Angel, do you have anything in your cup today?
Yeah, I got my Superman mug with some nice hot tea.
I love the Superman mug.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. It actually changes when you put hot liquid into it. It changes from Clark Kent to Superman.
Oh, see, what you're drinking out of is just as important as what you're drinking, in my opinion.
Right.
David, what about you? Anything?
I'm going with some white wine today.
Ooh, okay, that's new
Yeah,
for you.
new for me. Absolutely.
So I'm a mixologist today, and I have watermelon vodka
Ooh,
spritzer. I don't know. I'm trying it out. Something new.
it looks refreshing.
It's a little warm here in Texas, so it feels refreshing. Um, so Angel, okay, you wrote this piece on star manning, which we were talking about before we got online. I mean, it's sad to me that we need to be reminded to be kind to each other and be reminded that people often, not always, but often are coming in conversation in good faith. And your piece on star manning was just a novel way to remind people that we're all in this, game together, this whole, pool of humanity together. Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and how you came to this idea of star manning, and B, what exactly is star manning?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you, Jennifer and David, for having me. It's an honor to be here, and I'm here from Queens, New York, right now. A nice gloomy Sunday. And what do I do? I'm a writer, musician, artist, creative person, compulsive creative is how I usually say. Um, I'm a content creator for the nonprofit idealist.org. So if you don't know about them, definitely check it out. We are mainly a job board, so we connect aspiring, good faith people trying to do good in the world with opportunities for doing good. In working with nonprofits, we focus mainly on nonprofit organizations, though we do have other connections there. And I do various things there, writing all kinds of stuff from blog posts to editing email campaigns and that sort of creative stuff. It's wonderful. I love it. And on the side, I've been writing, as much as I can in any kind of creative way. Uh, a lot of essays. The Center for Inquiry is where I wrote the Star Manning piece and a few other pieces. I've been writing a monthly column there. Um, and where, the Star Manning thing is funny because it's something that I've been doing, and a lot of people do, but I specifically have been doing kind of consciously before I ever thought to give it a name or anything like that.
Hmm.
And it's not a new idea really. It's just, good faith and charity, and it's compassion. But um, it was on New Year's Eve, and I was kind of scrolling through Twitter, and a someone who I follow, Wilfred Riley on Twitter, someone who I follow, he posted something saying, never straw man, always steel man, right? And somebody underneath, I don't know who this person is, that their account has been deleted or they deleted it or something afterwards. So I haven't been able to give this person credit, but they posted as a response to that tweet the lyrics to David Bowie's song Starman. So there's a starman waiting in the sky. He'd like to come and meet us, but he thinks he'll blow our minds. There's a starman waiting in the sky. He told us not to blow it because he knows it's all worthwhile. And I read the chorus of that song, and something just clicked in my head, and I thought, straw man, steel man, starman. Maybe we can call this, conscious approach uh, towards good faith, we can call it star manning so that it has a kind of an actual name, and we can kind of appeal to it as a tool in conversation and discourse. And the motivation really was just that, I mean, Twitter is insane, right? And I'm doing something very counterproductive, or not counterproductive, but counterintuitive on Twitter, which is trying to have productive conversations and productive disagreements. You know, I'm actively seeking out people that I disagree with, who people who I don't understand. You know, I'll see their tweets and I'm like, I can't fathom how this person has arrived at this. So let me follow them. Let me start poking and prodding and asking questions. And I've just been trying to model the way that I think productive conversation can go. And then, you know, I came up with this name for it. So quickly, just to break it down, it's a kind of Three Little Pigs um, progression from straw to star, right? So the straw man is an argumentative fallacy. It's kind of like a cheat move, like an illegal move in argument, where you caricature somebody's point rather than engage with the actual point. You make up a point that seems like it's connected to it. It seems like it's related. It seems like maybe it's kind of what they're saying, but it's kind of by design. It's made to be weaker so that you can tear it down more easily. And it seems like you've refuted the person's argument, but you haven't. Star manning is kind of it's the third in a kind of progression, right? So a straw man is a caricature of somebody's argument, where, you know, for example, um, someone arguing against abortion, right? Saying, you know, abortion should be illegal. They're like, I don't think it's illegal. I don't think it should be legal because it's murder, right? And a straw man kind of retort to that would be to say something like, "Oh, so you want to control women's bodies, right? You just want to assert your dominance over women. You want to control them and tell them what to do and what they can't do," which is not necessarily what this person is arguing, right? This person is going in one direction and you're kind of taking it in the other. You're making it seem like that's what they're about. And then, of course, you know, if you frame it that way, then who would defend that, right? Like, oh yeah, you want to just dominate women, you want to control women's bodies. That sounds awful, right? So it's an easier way to get around the argument. Now, what you should be doing is steel manning, which is presenting the most charitable and honest version of the person's argument. Basically, repeat it back to them in a way that they would agree with. Right? That's steel manning. So for the abortion thing, it would say, okay, so you think it's murder, meaning that you think abortion is murder. You want it to be illegal because you believe human life is precious and that even the unborn counts as a human life. And a human life being extinguished is murder. So murder is illegal. Abortion should be illegal. That's what you mean, right? So that's a steel man, right? You're trying as hard as you can to understand exactly what it is that they're saying, what they mean, and then you engage with that. You could still disagree, but it's just about kind of establishing understanding. Now, the problem is that it's very difficult to steelman people when you're convinced that they're evil, when you're convinced that they're these horrible people who are just out to do the worst and ruin the world or ruin America or whatever, right? Whatever thing it is. Or if you are convinced that they're just trying to sneakily, you know, impose their authoritarian dominance over women, right? In this case, if you really believe that, then it's impossible to engage because you're already convinced this is a villain that you need to vanquish. You're not going to play fair. You're not going to try to understand them, right? So I saw this as an issue, and I saw this idea inspired by the David Bowie lyrics. I saw it. I saw this opportunity to kind of coin this term and use it as an addendum to steel manning. So star manning is you steelman the argument and then you explicitly connect with mutual intentions, mutual good intentions, so mutual goals and aspirations, right? So for the abortion thing, you would steelman the argument. You would say, yes, you believe that, you know, a baby is a human life, an unborn baby is still a human life, and killing that is murder. So you want it to be illegal. And the reason you care about this, the reason why you're arguing this, is because you hold human life sacred. You believe that it's beautiful and important, and you want to take care of it. You don't want people to be murdered, right? You really don't want people to be murdered, and you don't want people to suffer. Now, I totally agree with that motivation, right? I care about human life. I care about human beings as well, and we share that. So now I'm kind of establishing a common ground from which to disagree, where the disagreement doesn't need to be so hostile because we share this fundamental value, right? Now we just express it in different ways or we come to different conclusions about it, but fundamentally we care about the same things. We want the same things. We're trying to do what we believe is good. And that's the basic assumption behind star manning, is that most people, most of the time, are doing what they think is just and right and good, and they're just acting in accordance with whatever conclusions they arrive at based on that. Now, they might be wrong, they might have made a mistake there, they might be making assumptions that don't make sense. All of that is totally still on the table, and you can vehemently disagree with their conclusions and their points of view and their policy proposals and all that stuff. But you need not condemn them as moral monsters.
Mm.
It's just not necessary. Most people, the vast majority of people, are not acting consciously to make the world worse, a worse place to live. Most
Right.
people are trying to do what they think is right. And that's the assumption that is undergirding this star manning concept.
So I have a question for you, but I'll start with a statement. This morning I was on Facebook, and somebody that I was in a conversation with made what I thought was an outlandish comment, and I was, with frustration and anger coursing through my veins, was writing a very sharp retort to them. And then there's this angel hovering over me, who says, "Don't do that. Instead, ask a couple questions." So I'm not kidding you, by the way. I actually this morning, completely changed it up. I just asked a couple questions instead, I don't know if it'll lead to a more productive conversation, and I've done this many times. I've caught myself in the act, and probably more than a few times, I haven't caught myself in the act. I haven't stopped myself because that doesn't come easy to me. And I'm wondering, does this come easy to you? Does it reflect your basic disposition? And then you're building, and because you think it's a better way of going through life and actually creating the kind of change you want in the world, is it a philosophy, or is it also a reflection of who you are?
It's both, but that doesn't mean that it isn't really, really difficult.
Right.
I do a lot of, reply tweet, and I'm typing it out, and I'll be drafting it, and then I kind of pause for a moment, and I look at it, and I go, no, and I just delete it, and I won't
Uh-huh.
send it, right? So I do that, and I do get very angry. I do get very frustrated. It's very difficult, especially when the good faith is not being reciprocated, when you're being smeared, when you're being attacked. It's extremely difficult to do, and I'm not. I'm not spared from that difficulty, not at all. It's extremely
Okay.
difficult. But
I get. Mhm.
there are a couple of things that are motivating me to kind of check myself, right? It's kind of like, you're on a diet, you want to lose those 10 pounds, and then you're staring at that donut, and you're like, I really want that donut. But you know what I want more than that donut is to avoid feeling awful after I've had the donut, and to avoid feeling awful the next time I step on the scale and I haven't lost any weight. So I have that sort of balance in the back of my head at all times, where I am I beat myself up a lot for all my mistakes. So if I screw up and you know I lash out and I think, see, now I screwed up. I'm trying to be an example, and that's now a mark against me. That's now something that people can point to and say, aha, see, even you know. So there's that, and there's also just the thing of, I'm wrong way too often. So
Right.
one thing about me is that I wrote a little bit about this in a Twitter thread, but one thing that about me is that any time in my life, every single time, with 100% accuracy, I'm talking about 100%, every single time that I have decided, I'm tired of this, I'm tired of being a doormat, I'm gonna tell this person off, I'm sick of this. I'm finally just going to like spew, because this person deserves it. I'm tired of getting pushed around. I've been wrong every single time. There was something I misunderstood. There was something I missed. There was something I didn't hear. There was something I misheard, or there was something going on with me that's completely unrelated. And I was projecting and I was, kind of taking it out on this person or whatever. And any time that I snapped and lashed out and decided to, succumb to those, the devil on your shoulder, I've ended up feeling extremely guilty because something was made clear afterward to show me that I had screwed up, that I had made a mistake, and that this person didn't deserve my wrath.
Right.
And so I carry that stuff, and it really bothers me. So I really want to avoid it. So now, like, I kind of have like after having done that so many times and just feeling awful about it all the time, I have this reflex now, like, okay, hold on, pause. What is it you might be missing? How many other ways of looking at this are there that you might be missing? How do you know that the way you're seeing it is the right way? And usually by the time I get through that line of questioning, I've calmed down and I've recognized, okay, maybe I don't know. And kind of like what you did, I have to ask a few more questions. Right.
So,
Yeah, that leads me to once I've done the questioning, and even if I was right about my initial reaction, I've calmed down enough where I can approach it differently. So there's no
right.
reason to.
You have set yourself up for a very high standard, by the way, which you should. It's great. It's wonderful, and I'm glad you wrote that piece. If I wrote that piece, I'd be like, oh my God, now I have to live up to this reputation. So I was listening to you on Clubhouse talk about it, and somebody posed a question. It was about a broader question about the ascendancy of critical social justice in the public discourse, and someone said, "How are we ever going to get out of it?" And I'm probably not capturing exactly how the conversation went. And you said, "I think we all know how to get out of it: compassion." And there was a lot of nodding of heads and verbal agreements to what you said, and I did the same because I think that that's probably true most of the time. But then I started to think, you know what? This is a social change movement, and it's probably going to involve a multiplicity of interventions and arguments and approaches, some of which could be compassion. Um, and the way that, by the way, that the gay rights movement actually changed to compassion from from a rights-based argument to a love-based argument, that was transformational for them. But before they got to that point, an awful lot of people had to come out of the closet, and there were lawsuits that were launched, and those are not always star manning. Change can be messy and can be aggressive at times, and I'm wondering, do you think if there's a role in this for people who don't star man, who do the opposite in some ways, but make it so people like you can then show compassion and help change hearts and minds?
Yeah, people have been asking me this a lot, and I've been thinking about it a lot, and I don't see how the behavior of other people who decide to take a different tack and decide to just be, this like a warrior, and no, I take no prisoners. I'm just chopping heads off. That makes my life much more difficult. It makes what I'm trying to do so much harder because I have to wade through all the bullshit that other people cause when they behave this way, right? Because the problem is that if you're matching hostility with hostility, if you're matching bad faith with bad faith, all you're doing is creating more hostility and bad faith. And I have to deal with all the hostility and bad faith, right? It's equal opportunity from my point of view, right? If I see dishonesty, I don't care who it's coming from. I'm going to call it out and I'm going to say, this doesn't help. Doing this doesn't get us any closer to what we're trying to do here. And again, we're all trying to do the same thing. We just disagree vehemently on details. And they matter. Those details are important. But once we get into this territory where we are antagonizing each other, where we are not star manning, where we are consciously doing the opposite, we're trying to vilify, and we're trying to make people look as stupid as possible. We're trying to humiliate people. We're trying to shame them. That just makes the communication even harder, right? All of those things are walls that people put up in front of them, and you have to now chisel through it just to get to them and get to who they are and what they're trying to do really, and the core of it. What is the impetus, you know? And that's the thing, is it always goes back to this thing. These, you know, social justice people, I agree with them for the most part, right? Like their intentions are, I want to create a just society. I see injustice and I want to correct it. I care very much about this. And I see things that are wrong, and I see people who are not doing enough or not doing anything or actively doing, you know, the opposite. And I want to stop that. I want to change that. That's a beautiful thing. That's a beautiful impulse to have. We just need to direct it in a productive way, right? And so just having that in mind, you realize, okay, this is a human being, and this is a human being who shares most of my core values, because we're human beings. Of course we do, right? We all have a kind of wiring that forces us to care about basically the same things at bottom, right? The way I say it is, everyone wants safety, security, satisfaction, success, right? Everyone wants that at core. So everything that everyone does is motivated by those core things, whether they recognize it or not. And when we decide, no, I'm going to pick up the sword and I'm going to attack, I'm going to slay dragons, you need to make dragons now, right? And we're not talking about people anymore. We're talking about monsters. We're talking about something else, something inhuman that allows you to behave in a way that you wouldn't with your brother, right? Mm-hmm. But what I'm saying is, no, that's your brother. Maybe they're crazy, right? Maybe it's your crazy brother who ruins Thanksgiving, right? But that's still your brother, and you need to have that in mind at all times. We can't give up on each other.
But I think there's such a challenge there of doing that because of social media in some ways, because we aren't like looking that person in the eye, or we don't have that literal human touch with that person. But I will say that your Twitter and your response on Twitter and the response to people to you on Twitter is indicative of the fact that this is what people want. Even though Twitter is not necessarily, or social media in general is not always the right place, I think the outpouring of response to you shows that people want this and they need this. I mean, I see more positivity coming, towards you and towards what you're doing than I see negativity. And I think that's just indicative, again, of what people are looking for. And one of the things that you said, I really think is important. What we forget, and this is, again, I think a product of social media, because, it's really more lined up for statements than it is for questions and for conversation, or particularly, social media like Twitter, which is, you only have so much space to actually write. But what I'm hearing from you, and correct me if I'm wrong, is one of the first things to star manning is asking a question first. Mm-hmm. Asking, like, maybe I didn't understand you. Can you give me more clarity on that? And again, social media isn't the best place for asking questions, but it seems to me that just asking that question and opens up, instead of assuming, ask the question first and then you open up dialogue. Did I hear you right when you said that?
Yeah, definitely. That's a great way to start. I mean, that's so much better than, just hurling a javelin, right?
Yeah.
Ask a question like, okay, hold on, and ask a genuine question.
Right.
Don't do the, I forget.
Gotcha.
Name, but yeah, don't do the, so what you're saying is, and then insert absolutely despicable idea or claim. Go in with the actual intention of understanding, right? So if someone seems to me, I do this all the time. Someone tweets something and I go, I cannot understand how this person could possibly think this. That's an opening for me. That's not the door doesn't close there, it opens. For me, I go, okay, let me figure this out. Let me get in their head and understand the math. Let me see what it is that they're calculating that gets them to this answer at the end of the equation, right? Let me understand it. And I still might disagree with them, right? I might find, okay, yeah, I see what they're doing, but I don't think that's right. That's fine. but you're engaging with a person now. You're engaging with a person who has a worldview. Now, most people, again, are just, they think what they think, they believe what they believe, they value what they value, and that comes from their upbringing, their environment, their experiences, all that stuff. And that's exactly like you. The reason you believe what you believe, the reason you care about what you care about, is because you were brought up in a certain place at a certain time, around certain people, around certain ideas, right? It nothing can occur to you that you didn't think, like, you can't have something, you can't have an idea that didn't occur to you, right? Like, something has to occur to you. Things have to be presented to you in a certain way. So maybe this person you're talking to hasn't been privy to the information that you have, or vice versa, right? Maybe they understand something that you don't, and so find out. So yeah, it's
So
definitely, the approach is definitely, curiosity. Approach with curiosity,
right.
understanding. That's the idea. Yeah.
So I want to continue to play devil's advocate a little bit, even though I ultimately agree with you, I think.
No, go for it. It's good.
So I know from your Twitter and what you've written that you're critical of the radical forms of critical social justice that we're encountering in society. And like you, I also agree that there's insights, sometimes key insights that worldview holds that we can learn from, that can enrich our own knowledge of the world, but that they shouldn't be imposed to the exclusion of every other possible theoretical lens. Yet it is a very demanding theoretical lens. In a way, it says that um, that society is this way. The society is a binary. It is a power versus the powerless. And it doesn't try very often to make an argument. It's sort of a point of departure very often, that this is what we see in a fundamental sense because we have the insight to see it. Um, and and then and very often I find when I'm interacting with some of the folks who follow that school of thought, that they're not really actually trying to engage me in a way that tries to move me. They're trying to, maybe at times it's performative, maybe it's just asserting their own power. And it makes me wonder: who am I talking to if I try to starman? Am I just sort of expressing my own sense of dignity and how I should go through the world? Am I trying to convince people who are watching? Or do I actually have a shot at influencing this person who has a worldview that's very much an a priori assertion of what they think the world is like?
I think it's all of those things, and it depends on the individual, and it depends on the circumstances. But yeah, I mean, yeah, the one thing that I try to maintain is, well, first of all, I know people are watching, right? So I'm going to always put my best foot forward because I care very much about modeling this behavior, because this is something that I think we desperately need, right? So no matter what this person is doing to me, I'm going to behave the same way. I'm going to treat them with the same respect. I'm going to treat them with the same dignity, even if they're not reciprocating me, right? So I say all the time, resist, refute, reject bad faith, reject hostility, refute it, resist it, but never reciprocate, because all you're doing then is creating more of it, right? And we want less. So let it hit the brick wall and just kind of slide down and just be useless. And be mindful of when a conversation is not a conversation. If someone is really just railing at you and not listening, you can check out. You can say, look, I can see this is going nowhere, so I'm going to go, right? But you don't need to close the door forever on that, right? You can say, look, I can see that we're not going to get anywhere, but, I wish you the best. And then that's what I do. And what that does is kind of like what you mentioned when you decided to ask questions and you said, I don't know that I convinced this person, right? But what you didn't do was eliminate the possibility for that person to be convinced in the future, or for you to be convinced in the future. You're leaving the door open for future engagement. And it's, I don't want to be condescending and say, like, deprogramming takes a long time. because it's not necessarily that these people are brainwashed and you have to deprogram them with your superior knowledge, right? But getting through to people takes time sometimes, especially if they're very zealous and ideologically motivated. So you can't expect a single conversation to be, the knockdown, drag out thing that people seem to think. I'm just going to destroy this person. Well, I mean, just turn it around. What? How do you react when someone is extremely hostile towards you? Do you acquiesce and say, you know what, you have a great point. I'm going to, I'm going to, in the moment, change my mind and say so, right? That very rarely happens unless you're one of these people who consciously wants to do that in real time, right? Most of the time, you kind of go back home, you lick your wounds, and you think for a little bit, and you kind of sneakily change your mind, and your future behavior reflects that, but you don't really kind of pronounce like, aha, I was, my mind has been changed by this conversation,
But you know what?
especially if the conversation is hostile.
Angel, you just, if I may interject, you just said something that I think is really, really important. This goes back to like the whole social media and the visibility of social media.
Mhm.
Personally, and I think you said this yourself, so I feel like we're on the same page. I love when I'm wrong about someone. I love when I've like when when I've demonized them in my head and they turn out to. I mean, I actually love being wrong, right? But there's that problem with Twitter or social media again, where I think there's that fear of being wrong because there's that huge visibility. It's one thing within your family to say, "Hey, I'm sorry, I was wrong," and you're with your people and you're with your tribe and everyone comes together. And so I agree with you. I think that there that it takes a lot on such a visible platform to say, hey, you know what? I was wrong. Thank you for sharing that opinion. Or not only coming to it. So we already said ask questions first, curiosity. But then I think number two is humility. I was wrong. I learned something from you. And you're not, I mean, and sometimes you actually, you still walk away disagreeing, and that's fine. But we are so scared to say in this visible public space, I was wrong or I learned something. And I think that that's a problem too. And I think where star manning comes in is it kind of flips that on its head. And it doesn't necessarily say you say that you're wrong, but it gives people the opportunity to change their mind without um, the embarrassment or the shame of being called out. Right. So star manning is like, I hear what you're saying. This is what you're saying. I think we want the same place. And it takes someone to that natural progression. If they are even, you can still disagree, but if they are to go that way with you, where they can go, okay, now I've got it.
Yeah.
And that to me is brilliant because that's not how social media in general operates. Would you agree?
Yeah. Well, the thing is that social media is a tool, right?
Sure.
And a tool, a hammer can help you build a house, or you can bash someone's head in with it, right? It's up to you. And there are certain things where it's designed to kind of stoke outrage, because that outrage is a more potent form of attention, and so the algorithms are kind of geared towards that. But again, that still starts with us, right? Like the fact that we enjoy being outraged, the fact that we're getting something out of that, the algorithm is just noticing that and giving us more of it, because their job is to keep our attention, right? But we are still the locus of that. We can still decide, like you mentioned, the performativity of social media, right? You want to be seen a certain way. You want to be viewed this way as you go on your crusades on Twitter, as you're destroying the enemy or whatever, right? Yeah, sure, it's performative, but your performance is still up to you. You get to decide what role it is you're going to play, right? So what I've decided is I'm going to be Superman. That's my thing, right? I'm going to be this guy. I'm going to go into every situation as Superman. I'm going to play that role. That's what I'm performing, and it's sincere. I'm not just putting on an act, but I'm conscious of that. Like, this is how I want to do this, because this is the world I want to create. This is the environment I want to have around me. I don't want hostility. I want to take hostility and neutralize it. And everyone can do that. We can all do that if we just decide, okay, I'm not going to reciprocate all the bad faith, all the hostility, all the name calling, all the smears, all the terrible logic and despicable things that people do and say to you on social media, I'm just not going to let it. I'm just not going to let it, and I'm not going to give it back. I won't. I refuse.
Given how polarized the discussion has become in this country and really throughout the West, I was talking to a pollster friend of mine who does polling, and he said throughout his career, you could poll on any given issue, and the structure of public opinion would be a bell curve, right? With the majority or the plurality of opinion being in the middle. He said nowadays it looks like a double hump camel on any given issue, with the middle being hollowed out. Given that's the direction of public discourse, at least in the last 10 years or so, and the way that social media continues to sort of exacerbate our discourse, are you hopeful?
Yeah, I definitely am.
And what makes you hopeful?
Because the same capacity we have to create that double hump camel can be turned in the other direction. Like, we have immense power to create the world that we want to create. And here we are. We're communicating through time and space. We are people who may never have met were it not for our collective ingenuity and creativity and prosperity, right? And the vast majority of the time, most of us live in places where we can step outside, walk down the street to the store, and not necessarily worry about being attacked and murdered, right? Like, for the most part, most people live in this reality where even if they're not in the safest neighborhood, they still kind of can go about their day to day, right? There's a certain amount of good faith that is just pervading everything, and we know this because everything for the most part is working, right? Even with 4 years of he who shall not be named, right? causing as much mayhem as he possibly could cause. I don't know if he could have caused more. We're still here. We survived, right? We definitely were strained. We're definitely frayed, but so much of what we've built held. And that to me is a sign that, that doesn't mean we don't fix things. That doesn't mean we should just let that happen over and over again, because things can break. But it shows that, we have this fundamental ability to cooperate. And our cooperation is what got us here in the first place. Like, the problems that we have now are hilarious if you put them in context, right? So keeping that in mind as well is like, okay, like, this is important. We still have to care about all this stuff. But man, it's really good that we're not on a field dodging a mace right now. Isn't that great? And it is. It's amazing. Isn't it great that, we're in the middle of, we're hopefully at the tail end, actually, of a pandemic. And it could have been so much worse. And here we are, a year after this thing really kicked off, we're all getting vaccine appointments. That's miraculous. That's incredible. 100 years ago, this was a nightmare, and right. Keeping that stuff in perspective helps me at least maintain, hopefulness. And, I believe that people are, with the exception of people whose wiring is really crossed and screwed up, most people are good and want good. And good means what is best for, our flourishing. That's generally what that means. And we all have that just hardwired into us. And we're hardwired to cooperate. That's why we're here.
So you engaged in what I call comparative reasoning there. You said things might look bad, but we can compare to what they could have been and understand them in a new light. And I'm wondering if you look at the situation, let's say in the United States, where we have disparities, right? We have disparities, we have prejudice, we have racism and the like, and you compare them to what other countries, other civilizations, other time periods have lived through, and you say, well, we have to put that in context as well. That yes, we have problems. We shouldn't use that as the fact that we have smaller problems than much of the rest of the world is an excuse not to address the problems we have. But understand our sort of moral assessment and intellectual assessment of where we are today is based at least in some part on where the rest of the world is as well. Do you agree with that line of reasoning?
Yeah, I mean, it's very hard to tell someone who is struggling, hey, you'd be struggling way more 100 years ago. That's not going to be very helpful because their conscious experience is still awful.
Hmm.
And,
Yeah,
we do need to do everything we can to mitigate that sort of thing.
sure.
And we're far from perfection. We will always be. Uh, but what I think the reason for having that zoomed out sort of put things in context, kind of Steven Pinker sort of framework in your head
Right,
is to avoid the feeling of hopelessness, the feeling of,
right,
oh, like, everything is just going to hell and there's nothing we can do about it. No, there's plenty we can do,
right,
and there's plenty we've done. And, you know, the, yeah, the place where my hope comes from is the fact that we have had terrible problems in the past and we worked through them. And
right.
we're still on that trajectory. We're nowhere near finished, but that's what gives me hope. So even though people are suffering and none of this is going to console them, right? They're still struggling, they're still starving, they're still homeless. None of this is going to make them feel any better about their current situation, right? But it makes me feel better about our capacity to do
Hmm.
something about
And it's a better, arguably a better model of social change when you emphasize the progress that we've made, that we've shown we can make, rather than all of the glaring inadequacies that we honestly do face that we need to overcome. There's a branch of consulting, organizational consulting, called appreciative inquiry. And when you go into an organization, try not to look for all the problems that every organization has, but actually for the strengths that they have. And you use that as the point of departure. Once you identify what people do well, it's actually turns out easier to sort of build up their capacity to overcome some of the problems. And I wonder if we've lost some of that in the current discussion over the problems that exist in America today.
that. Yeah, I think so. And I think that maybe that's where I'm coming from. I hadn't heard of that, but maybe that's what it is. What I'm basically saying is, look, we're really good at cooperating and connecting with one another. We're
Hmm.
really good at that. We're just doing it in this really weird way where we're forcing some people out and and drawing these strict border lines when we don't have to do that, right? We don't have to. We can turn all of our energy towards our problems together, right? Like the issue of police misconduct, police violence, right? That should be a unifying issue. That shouldn't be a divisive issue. It shouldn't be an us versus them issue. It should be an us issue because everyone suffers from this problem, right? I mean, yeah, in absolute numbers, more quote unquote white people are killed by cops every year, right? And now you talk about proportionality and all that sort of stuff, and it gets more complicated. But that's a problem, right? That should be everyone saying, "Hey, let's make it so cops stop killing everybody." And I think that in a lot of ways, there are understandable reasons for highlighting specific problems for specific groups. But if doing it that way gets in the way of solving the actual problem, then we're just wasting time. We're screwing ourselves, and we're making enemies out of potential allies. Everyone, including police officers who want to do good, who the reason they join the forces because they care about their communities and want to do good in them. All of us should be banding together to figure out the best way to fix this problem because it affects everyone.
You know, before we let you go, Angel, you also, this is a shifting gears here a minute, but you also recently wrote on the difference between meritocracy and merit.
Mhm.
And I would love to hear your, um, you to verbalize that for us and give us your in-depth view
Sure,
on that.
sure. Yeah, so it's complicated because I think there are a lot of definitions around those terms, and it can get confusing. So you know, but meritocracy, as far as I understand it, and the way that I've always thought of it and used it, is this idea that no matter where you come from, no matter who you are, we have a system that is based on merit. We have a system where, you know, look, this is a race and there's a finish line here, and whoever crosses the finish line, they get the ribbon, right? So, you know, it's up to you. You run as fast as you can. If you're first place, great. Second place, great. Anybody who crosses the finish line. That's the idea that we have, right? But the problem is that this is an illusion. We don't really have a society that works this way, because not everyone is starting that race at the same place with the same abilities, with the same capacities. You know, some people don't have shoes, some people don't have legs, some people can't run, some people have no, you know, track and field program in their school, right? Some people are malnourished, and so their, you know, their stamina is going to be lower than other people's. Some people are literally just starting further back. So when the gun goes off and everyone starts running, some people are just hopelessly behind and they're never going to make it. They're never going to make it, you know, before certain other people. You know, it's kind of, there's that exercise where they line students up in the gym, and they say, you know, if both your parents are still married, take a step forward, you know, and if you, you know, I forget what all the little details are, but it's stuff like that, right? It's like, you know, if both your parents live at home with you, if you know, that sort of thing, take a step forward, take a step forward. And by the end of the questioning, you see some people are way ahead than other people, and those criteria are real and they affect people. Um, and so that's the problem with this idea of meritocracy, that we live in a meritocracy, right? America thinks it's a meritocracy, and it is not at all. Some people are born through no fault of their own. They are born with talents, certain talents that are valued less than others, right? Some people have skill sets that are valued less than others. Some people are born in communities, to certain groups, to certain parents, where, you know, maybe there's destitution, maybe there's a really terrible underfunded education system, maybe it's a dangerous area, right? All of those things affect the outcome of, you know, where a kid is brought up, how a kid is educated, how a kid can end up being capable of crossing that finish line in all these different endeavors. And that's a serious problem that we need to fix, right? And we need to fix it in kind of in multiple ways. But we need to be careful not to eliminate the concept of merit itself in the process of doing this, right? Merit itself still matters. And by merit, I mean that, you know, if 100 push-ups is the standard, you need to be able to do 100 push-ups. It's not good for you or for anybody or for society to kind of take certain people and say, look, I understand that you're underprivileged, so for you it's 50 push-ups. That doesn't help the underprivileged person, right? You're just lowering the bar for them. It's a bigotry of low expectations, right?
Correct.
And
Yeah.
so, you know, I feel that particularly as, you know, a quote brown person. I'm a member of one of the groups that is supposed to be benefiting from this kind of mindset, right? We're like, oh, we're going to lower the standard for you. We're going to change standardized tests so that they're less important, because as a group, you're all not performing well enough for, you know, various reasons. That doesn't help me, right? What you should be doing is, getting back to the race analogy, right? Give me sneakers, because it's not my fault that I don't have them, right? Make it so that there's a track and field program at my school, because it's not my fault that I was born in this neighborhood with this school that has been underfunded for decades, right? Get me a great coach. Get me all the sustenance that I need. You know, make sure that I'm as nourished as I possibly can be, so that I can work out more and build more muscle, so that when the gun goes off, I can compete and I can run just as fast as everyone else. Because there's nothing, you know, inherent about me that is preventing me from achieving those things, from crossing that finish line. There are environmental factors. There are, just random social factors that are preventing me, right? So we can fix those, but don't lower the standard. Don't take the finish line and bring it closer to where I'm standing. That doesn't help me. That hobbles me, and it makes me, at least for me, you know, I know people disagree with this, and I know people are totally cool getting this thing. They think it's just desserts because of historical things that are valid, but for me, it makes me feel awful. It makes me feel, wow, okay, I can't make the hurdle, so you're just lowering it for me, and I'm supposed to feel good about just being able to hop over it. That doesn't help. That's not progress. That's regress for sure.
Yeah, I mean, uh, I kind of here's where I'm at on that. I feel like where we can do better as a society is exactly what you said, making sure everyone has the sneakers, making sure everyone has the coaches. But then at some point, because we all are different, and some people just don't have, they just don't want to jump the hurdle, right? I mean, they do. That's not where they're at in life, and so I like this distinguishing between meritocracy and merit, where it still says there's a certain baseline as a society that we're responsible for, and yet it also allows for that agency and responsibility, to say, once we got you to the starting line, now you decide, if you want to run the race or not. And so that distinguish, I think, is very, very important, where it allows both for communal responsibility as well as personal responsibility.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that that's another thing too, is that people are born with different abilities, different skill sets. The dials are calibrated differently
Right.
for everyone.
Right.
But society values certain skills above others, right? We care more about really, really talented surgeons than we do about really, really talented musicians, right? We love musicians, but that's a way harder gig to succeed at, right? There are many, many, many quote unquote failed musicians, right? And that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? Because there's a utility in surgery that doesn't quite exist the same way in music, right? Music is entertaining, it's enriching on a human level, and it matters. It's really important. But when you need bypass surgery, you want to make sure that person knows what they're doing, right? And so whatever the bar is for becoming a surgeon, that bar should stay there, because we need people who end up on the other side and they say, I am a surgeon. We want to be able to know that they really are surgeons and that they know what they're doing, right? But that shouldn't mean that we don't value the musician as a human being. That shouldn't mean that we leave the musician to rot, because hey man, sorry, but we don't care about your talent that much. So you're gonna have to get a job, and you're gonna have to like, if you're trying to make it as a musician, the starving artist cliche thing, right? Like, sorry, that's just your luck and your lot in life. And I don't think that's fair either, because like, some people aren't runners, right? Some people aren't runners at all, but they're really good at something else. And just because society doesn't have the exact same sort of need for that something else doesn't mean that we should just kind of let people go by the wayside, right? They're still people, they still matter. So what we should do is raise the floor, so that there's a baseline beneath which we just do not allow people to live, because it's unethical, because we're the most prosperous society in history, and we can absolutely make it so that no one is destitute just because they don't happen to be a rocket scientist, right?
Hmm. Couldn't agree more.
Yeah. So it's a tough thing, but it's really important for people to feel like they've earned what they've gotten. It's really important for me to know that if I get an award, or if I get a job, if I get into a school, I want to know that it's because of my abilities, it's because of my hard work, right? And the piece that I wrote, I kind of used this analogy of this story where I went to go see Black Panther with my fiance, and we were standing on line, and a lot of people were dressed up, and they were decked out in you know African traditional African clothing and stuff like that. It was a really exciting, beautiful environment, right? It was so cool. We were all looking around, and my fiance joked to me like, "Oh, you should have dressed up. You should have represented your Nigerian heritage, right?" Because I had just gotten my Ancestry.com results, And, you know, it goes right from Dominican Republic, where my parents are born, right to Africa, right? So Iberian Peninsula and Africa, of course, because, you know, we know. But, and, you know, it's just like a kind of joke, like, oh, you should have done that. But this woman in front of us overheard that, and she turned around and she had free coupons for concessions, right? And she said, here, free popcorn, right? And we were like, oh, wow, cool. It just came out of nowhere. And it took a moment for us to connect the dots, that the only reason she did that was because she overheard that and she thought, oh, he's African. Here we go. And, you know, we got proof of it because she went and like ignored other groups of people and went straight to very visibly black people and gave them the concessions. And it sucked for me. You know, it's a stupid small thing that doesn't matter, but it sucked for me in that moment because I was genuinely appreciative of this gift, right? This it was a sign of kindness. It was meant to be a sign of recognition and solidarity, but it kind of just made me feel off because it was just I needed to just be like a box to check. I was just a thing. I was just a member of a group. And here, because of reasons, you're going to get this free thing. And it has nothing to do with you as a person. You know, I'm not being kind to a stranger because they're a stranger and I want to be kind. It's no, I have an agenda here and I'm doing this thing. And it turned me off. And it made me feel the same way when I heard Allison Collins from the San Francisco Board of Ed, formerly from the San Francisco Board of Ed, talking about merit and saying that merit is racist. Right? It's the same thing. It's you're telling me that I can't compete on this level. You're telling me that I'm not good enough to pass these tests. And so the only way to get me into school, the only way to get me on equal footing with everybody else is to pick me up and carry me over there. And I just think that's way more harmful than helpful.
That goes back to one of the things that I spoke with earlier on this podcast, affirmative education versus affirmative action. And affirmative education being making sure that we've got those resources there, again, as the baseline, so that there is no need for affirmative action as a supplement.
I do think, you know, affirmative action makes sense in that, you know, like, for example, I heard Jon Stewart tell a story about how, you know, their process for hiring writers was, you know, submissions have no name. It's just the writing, right? And so they're thinking this is merit, right? We're looking at these pages, and if they're funny, they're funny, and you know, whoever's best wins, right? And he thought this is great, this is fair, but obviously he's noticing, well, we're not getting many people from many different areas. We're getting kind of the same sorts of groups of people. So what's going on here? And they realized that they had overlooked something. That even though they were doing this blind process, they were only fishing in, you know, Harvard and Princeton and like these places where it's for other reasons, you know, certain groups are unlikely to be there, right? So they had to fix that. They had to correct that, right? So they had the right idea, right? The blind audition thing is a great idea, but they were blind to the other part of it, right? And so they have to correct that. So, you know, there's a sense in which affirmative action makes sense, and I understand it, and I'm for it. But we have to be careful, like how we're calibrating this stuff, like whether we're, you know, we're kind of like redirecting the river to avoid a flood over here, and then we end up flooding all of this. And you know, there are unintended consequences.
And I think we're saying the same thing. I mean, you know, in the instance that you gave, you know, they were fishing from one pond, right? I mean, if we had stocked all the ponds, and you know, there were more opportunities from which to fish, to carry that analogy that I'm not so sure really works, but whatever, I went there. Well, I'm almost done with my drink. David, do you have any other questions for our fabulous guests?
I'm done with my drink. Thank you so much. It was really terrific to be able to actually talk to you and not just read your writing, which is excellent. And I hope you'll continue to enlighten us all and humanize us as well.
I will continue to do my best. Thank you. I appreciate you having me, and it was wonderful talking to you.
Yeah, you're the humanity in our Twitter, so we are grateful for you.
Well, it's not just me. It's not just me. You're all there too.
We're working.
I just
Well,
got
works in
the-
progress.
Yeah. Well, aren't we all are? But I've just got the highlighter out, and I'm saying, look, I like this. I like this. So we should all just be, let's highlight each other.
Yeah. Thank you for listening to this episode of Hold My Drink. Like or subscribe to the show and check out the show notes for links to source material and to our website where you can find what each of us is reading every week, different news with different views. If you have a topic that you would like us to explore, drop us a line. And join us next week as we say Hold My Drink and the conversation gets real.